for the previous owner of this Porsche 911 Turbo, the past few years have been nothing short of a nightmare. As for the car, it truly is a gem. Speed yellow paint, carbon ceramic brakes, and of course a proper 6-speed manual transmission. But now, things get ugly. You see, the car, that's back here on the trailer, but the engine, that's in the bed of the truck, and spoiler alert, it's not in one piece. Now, I've just bought this car for $45,000, which is a fair price for a 911 Turbo in this condition. But as for the previous owner, he invested $150,000 in this car, and this disaster of a Porsche is what he got left with. You guys know the drill by now. We have the car, we have the parts. It's time to get it back to the shop and get cracking. The only thing better than one broken 911 Turbo. Two, obviously.
I honestly don't know how I feel about this.
What's wrong?
Because we're supposed to get the other one done because everybody's waiting for it, and now we just get another project?
Well, this is a little different. It's all right, Fernando. The only problem we do have here is that this one is a better deal than mine. It's also much cleaner than mine, so that's kind of hurtful, but...
It actually looks way better than yours. In all ways possible. Do you see the interior? Wow. Just look at this.
It has the OEM carbon fiber wheel, the paint match center console, yellow seatbelts. It's just full of really expensive OEM options. I'm not personally the biggest yellow fan, but one that we're planning to fix and hopefully make a little money on. It's not a bad color. It definitely pulls more than black, silver, all those types. One other thing I'm not typically a huge fan of, but I think it looks awesome on this car, are color matched wheels. I've always liked these Tech Art wheels on the 911 Turbos. They look amazing. Guess how many miles are on this thing?
About 30,000.
76,000.
Wow. Wait, what?
Yeah, there's that. I didn't tell you guys about that.
This looks familiar. This is kind of what all the Porsches around this shop look like.
Stop it.
This is normal, right? I just absolutely love the fact that we just get these cartoon character, Porsches in the shop. You got Barney on the lift over there. You got Big Bird now. What's going to be next? Maybe, what's the big red dog? Clifford? Get a Guards Red one?
If any of you guys have a Guards Red 911 Turbo, I would actually love to buy that, so put it in the comments. Now, these days, it just looks like a really clean, high-option, somewhat modified 911 Turbo. But believe it or not, just a few months ago, this car was making 1,000 horsepower. Problem is, it only made 1,000 horsepower for 300 miles. Now, trust me, guys, if you think the exterior and the interior are clean, wait until you see the underside. Not even a month before this car had its little mishap, the previous owner had the entire bottom of it cryoblasted.
For the mileage and this clean?
Unreal, right? Absolutely unreal.
It looks pretty much brand new. You guys know I'm going to take shots at Porsches whenever I can. There's literally not a negative thing that I can say about the underside of this car.
Not only is it amazingly clean, but I'm getting my first look at some of the mods the car has. Bilstein coilovers up there. He also replaced the axles with brand new OEM Porsche ones 300 miles ago. As you would expect of a car that previously made 1,000 horsepower, it has some big intercoolers on there as well. We have some type of aftermarket fuel system. It runs all the way up there to the tank. Apparently this thing got a pretty extravagant fuel system. Those guys there look pretty familiar. Numeric racing shifter cables. Apparently it does have the shifter as well, which I may have to steal for my car. We have ourselves some type of red sway bar there, presumably Eibach. Obviously, I didn't get the best look at the underside of this car when I was dragging it out of his driveway yesterday. I wanted to throw it on the lift first thing and make sure it checked out.
Completely checks out.
Now the car, it's amazing. It's everything I wanted and everything I expected. The parts, on the other hand, that's where things go downhill just a little bit. A lot of bit.
Whoa! I'm definitely not ready for that.
It's a lot. It is a lot. Frankly, it feels like Christmas in spring. The previous owner did say that he included absolutely everything that he got back from the shop. That's a very important distinction. He didn't say he included everything to get the car back together. The good news is we don't actually have to use all these parts. We're gonna pull it out, we're gonna assess what we have here, and then we're gonna decide what we're gonna reuse, and most importantly, what we're gonna sell to try to recoup some money. This 997 turbo build, it went off the rails just a little bit. This 911 turbo actually has to be financially viable, so the plan I'm going with for now is demodding the car to about 600 horsepower. I'm thinking that once we get rid of a lot of this stuff, it'll allow us to get the entry price of that car down to say $25-ish thousand. That way, when we start dumping obscene amounts of money into the rebuild on this car, we have a little more breathing room. Off the bat, I can say with certainty, that awesome exhaust right there is going on the keeper pallet. One thing that we very obviously need to keep because it's a crucial part of the car, the manual transmission here, which, if I might add, does already have the GT2 slave. Heavier than I remember. Oh, yeah. In case any of you guys are unaware how much this transmission costs, $15,000 used. I did just get looking at this exhaust a little bit, and it looks really big to me. It looked a little off compared to the 3-inch titanium that I have on my 911 turbo. Come to find out, this is a massive 3.5-inch X-pipe exhaust. Is that overkill for the power levels we're going to be running in this car? Absolutely. But I mean, we already have it on hand. It's beautiful, straight pipe with drone tubes. It has slash cut tips. I'm inclined just to use this because after all, even if it is overkill, you know it's gonna sound awesome. Fernando, you're up next. What are we taking?
It's a lot of parts, but we should start with the head.
I'm digging it. These actually happen to be one of the only parts on the engine that are actually good. So cylinder heads it is. Now, I am definitely counting on these bad boys to recoup us a good amount of money. When this build got done 300 miles ago, they completely refurbished the heads. Not only that, they got built sort of. Unlike the engine we did in my 911 turbo, these are stock cams, but the valve springs and the valves are both Ferrea. You guys are gonna understand exactly why once you see the rest of this engine, but when I heard what happened to it, I 100% assumed that the cylinder heads were gonna be trashed. In a trend that I strongly hope continues on this car, we got incredibly lucky. I know I haven't told you guys exactly what happened with this engine yet, but it chucked the rod. As some of you may be aware, when that happens, it's a virtual certainty that a piston's gonna come up and smack the valves. Somehow, some way, it didn't happen. There's not a single contact mark on any valve or the surface of the head. This next part may sound a little weird to some of you guys. We're not rebuilding this engine. If it doesn't make sense now, I promise it will later. But the good news is that means we get to sell these fresh cylinder heads. Obviously, because these were on an engine that had a catastrophic failure, they're gonna need to be gone through, at least cleaned. But the important part remains. All the castings, the hard parts, they're all in good shape. That's what's most important. We have plenty of aftermarket stuff in here as well. I don't know exactly what we're gonna get for these, but I know they're not cheap. As we head back to the old parts bin here, I suppose now will be the perfect time to tell you that I am going to keep you guys updated on the entire financial process of this build later in the video. How much we sell the parts for, how much we have invested in the car, everything. Why don't we go with turbos next? I gotta admit, guys, this is not a bad looking setup. But as nice as these look, things are a little weird with the whole turbo setup on this car. They're definitely aftermarket turbos, which of course they would need to be to make this power. But on one of the original invoices on this car, before the final invoice, this was billed as an $8,000 Zona rotor turbo setup. On the final version of the bill, as you can see there, this was just listed as a custom turbo kit by the shop. Now, because of what's on the current receipt and the fact that this is obviously not the Zona rotor turbo setup that was originally billed, I don't know what turbos these are. We have ourselves a 58mm compressor wheel. We also have teal wastegate actuators on there, aftermarket headers, which are NHP exhaust. I'm unfamiliar with the brand. It is a nice setup. I just don't know what it is. One thing we definitely can ID here is this silicone inlet pipe. These are from our guys over in Sweden at Do 88. I have a bunch of this stuff on my car and I absolutely love it. Because of the fact that we're going back to stock turbos, we're also throwing a set of stock inlets on it, so just like the turbos, these are getting sold. Trust me, I know it's weird for me too. We're going the wrong way on this build. But I suppose if we think of this more like a restoration and not an off-the-rails build like my car, it starts to make more sense. Maybe. Next up on the list of good parts here, this $4,000 RPS billet clutch. I actually have used an RPS clutch before, not in a Porsche. It was in my ZR1. I loved it. These are top notch. And if you look at this thing, oh my God, it is brand new. This is an ultra complex, big power clutch. You definitely don't need something like this in a small power car. like the small power car behind me. So once again, this is getting sold. Used clutches are generally a tough market, but given that this one has absolutely no mileage on it, and it looks like this, I think we can still pull a good amount of money. Now, what's that saying in life? You can only avoid the bad so long, you gotta face it head on. That's what we're about to do. Though we might act like children once in a while, this is not a children's channel, but today we're gonna learn how to count. 1 rod, 2 rod, 3 rod, 4 rod, 5 rod. That's 5 total rods. There's 6 holes in this. I'm sure the best and brightest of you might have got it, but one rod disconnected itself. It also happened to take a piece of crankcase with it. That's right, absolute catastrophic failure on this thing. This brand new, nearly $7,000 GT3 crank, absolutely toast. I thought the failure in my 911 Turbo was bad. This is 10 times worse. This is an obscene amount of money that just vanished into thin air. And yes, of course you can say that's the name of the game when building 1,000 horsepower cars. But the problem we have here, this bill was supposed to be warranted. Now, I did agree, out of respect to the previous owner, and considering the fact that he has an ongoing legal situation with this whole ordeal going on, we can't reveal the name of the shop. Not only that, but of course, we only got one side of the story for this whole ordeal. I'm simply giving you guys the story that the previous owner gave to me, which he did back up with receipts and emails. Either way, it's an absolute shame that this happened. This was a super expensive failure. The crankcases from Porsche are obscenely expensive. The rods themselves, they're not cheap either. But you guys know me, I like to find the positive in everything. This is going to be the coolest piece of wall art I have ever had. On that note, I am taking suggestions in the comments section. What do I do with this? What do I make it into? You got to give me something cool and I will do it. Of course, we have the other side of the crankcase here, which is not good. Not good at all, but it's not that bad. You could be forgiven for thinking this one actually looks normal if it didn't have pieces of bearing laying in it. All kinds of just junk. It's absolutely filthy. And yes, it could be clean, but correct me if I'm wrong, guys. You cannot combine separate case halves in these cars. If I'm wrong about that, definitely correct me in the comments. But for now, this is going to join the other case half over here on the pending wall art palette. Got ourselves a valve cover there, which is in good shape. And whew, good shape these cylinders are not. It's pretty obvious here which cylinder had the catastrophic failure. This hole right here. That's the rod that went through it sideways. What I didn't expect is for it to come through the backside and hit the other set of cylinders. One other thing I definitely did not expect, especially on a build with only 300 miles, is that right there. That cylinder wall is 8 up. So this roughly goes like that. See, it's not that hard. They said these Mezgers were complicated. I did think we were going to have one set of cylinders to sell, but I guess, like the case halves, wall art. If you thought we were close to done, you were wrong. There is so much stuff in here. A majority of it is engine parts, and a majority of it is getting sold.
Those are normally plastic ones, right?
Nailed it. They should have had you build this guy's car instead of sending it to this place. These bad boys right here, stainless steel replacements. They're about $1,000, if not close. Don't quote me on that. Very, very important. The plastic elbows back here break, and then you're screwed. You have to drop the engine. Needless to say, regardless of the power level you're running, critical piece, definitely keeping these. Reliability mod numero dos, right here. You pin this camshaft. That sleeve right there will spin on the camshaft. It causes all sorts of issues. So you stick a pin right through there, problem solved. Just like those SharkWorks fittings, very important regardless of power level, so we will have to account for that in the future. Next up on the list of stuff that's gonna be absolute overkill for the type of car we're building, this fuel setup. Certified big boy power stuff. Injector Dynamics 1700s and Silly Rabbit Motorsports fuel rails. Not only that, but we have a really nice line set up here with an integrated E85 sensor. It's honestly an awesome setup. We're just not gonna need it. As advertised, ID 1700, these injectors are no joke, not to mention they're really expensive. Though we don't need these injectors ourselves, there is one thing we have to do to them before we can sell them, and that's send them out and have them cleaned. It's about $100 to have these things cleaned, but it's a worthy investment to make sure whoever actually buys these from us doesn't immediately grenade a motor and have it end up on a pallet like that. The intake manifolds, they're just stock, nothing real special, but they are worth a good bit of money, and my current plan for rebuilding this car means we don't need these. This next part, I'm gonna be a little sad to see go because it would look so good on the car. It's an absolutely gorgeous IPD Y-pipe paint matched speed yellow. And of course, what would a Y-pipe be without the matching plenum? Trust me guys, I am so tempted to leave this stuff on the car, but the fact remains that it has more value sold separately than it does sold with the car. This next part might be my eyes deceiving me, but I believe that this is a GT3 throttle body as well. 82 millimeters is what we're looking for. 83, I'm gonna call that a win. Yet another awesome piece that has a decent bit of value, and I'm sure you guys see where this is going. We don't need it for the build. All right, guys, we've been at this for a while now, and we found some awesome stuff, but I'm thinking we need a new plan of attack. We still have bins upon bins of parts. There's all kinds of stock engine parts in there, not to mention the back seat. That is still full of parts as well as the door closes itself. If we keep going at this the way we have been, we're gonna be here all night. So I think it's time to just get all this stuff out of the truck, get it laid out, and see where we're at. Absolutely unreal, guys. If you've ever doubted exactly how complex these cars are, how much goes into getting one of those together, just check this out. A few parts I know we're gonna need to keep off the jump: rear bumper beam, every single one of those under trays, and that pretty red sway bar right there. Every single one of those parts is actively missing off the car. They're definitely not extra, and we definitely don't have replacements. That's a box of broken dreams right there. 5 pistons, also missing the one that was connected to that rod that exited the block. There is a good chance that these 5 pistons are good, but I'm not sure that anybody's gonna wanna use 5 odd pistons. Yes, you could order a replacement, but realistically, when anybody goes this far down the road of building a car that expensive, they're probably just gonna order new. Well, guys, you may notice that it's light out once again. Yes, we are on day 2 of this, but as we continue to dig through these parts, I have uncovered the third and final part of the reliability mod puzzle. Earlier, I showed you guys those stainless elbows that replaced the plastic one. This mod also has to do with the cooling system, but it's just a little bit different. These aluminum pipes are the factory pipes. You see that weld right there? That's aftermarket, however. From the factory, these are just glued in there. After time and so many heat cycles, they eventually separate and pop out. As you might imagine, that leads to a massive coolant leak, and like most things in this car, you need to remove the engine to fix it. Not to mention, if you don't catch it in time, you're gonna overheat and pop a motor. Then I'm gonna end up having to buy your car, and trust me, you don't want that. AC compressor spins freely, we don't need that. We definitely need this. That's the engine harness. Specifically, it's the engine harness out of this car, which of course has a manual transmission. Remember that manual transmission part, because that comes into play very shortly. What a shame. Yet another engine oil cooler here. This one also failed because before this whole build that failed 300 miles ago, the previous owner spun a bearing, so he was on his second failure. And this guy here was in a box by itself. I presume this is the oil pump. And Fernando, do we want to take a guess if this...
What?
I was about to ask you if this was good. I'll just let them see for themselves. Oh! Well, after quite the surprise with the oil pump here, this is a box that the previous owner pulled out of his attic. This is not stuff that was with the car at the shop, so I'm kind of excited to see what we have in here. Fuel pump assembly, and this one is a big one. No, it's actually broken. That sucks. You see right there, the actual housing itself is broken, and that's not ideal. We definitely needed this. As of right now, I still have no idea what's going on in the fuel tank of this car. So we are in for a giant pain reverting this fuel system back to stock. There's aftermarket connectors, there's AN lines there. As nice as this setup is, some of the OEM to the aftermarket connections are just popping right off. That would concern me a little bit.
Nope. Is it getting through your eye?
No. Lightning fast reaction speed. I closed my eyes and it just splattered all over my face. This braided line right here runs all the way to the back of the car to that fuel pressure regulator. There's no stock lines to be found anywhere. Yes, that's a giant problem. I believe this guy here is the fuel filter. From the factory, it sits right about there. As you can see, it is no longer there. I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to need a lot of fuel parts to return this car to stock. This engine right here makes this entire project possible. For obvious reasons. When I got the call to potentially buy this blown up 911 turbo, I was super hyped on it because I knew all along that back at the shop, we had another engine from another 2007 911 turbo sitting here. The 911 turbo that gave us this engine has definitely seen the end of the road, but the engine, this only has 26,000 miles on it. There's so much more life left in this, and that's where it gets to live it. While this is technically the same engine, the car this came out of was a Tiptronic, which is a fancy word for automatic. Is that going to cause an issue? I don't know. I truly don't. But it's why I was so hyped to have this manual engine harness. If it causes an issue, chances are that it's going to be able to be resolved by putting this on it. Lucky for us, we do know all the right people, so we'll have the guys at AIM advise on that, as well as pinning the camshafts and see if there's anything else they recommend we do before we stick it in the car. The wing, not supposed to look like this. Turns out these hydraulics are shot. It's just leaking hydraulic fluid. These are known to fail. We've been very lucky in this shop. Every trunk that I've had come in has actually been okay, including the one on my car. We finally got bit by that hydraulic spoiler failure bug. So here's where we stand right now. I think we have ourselves a pretty solid plan. I'm gonna go hunt down and order a fix for the trunk. I'm also gonna take a look and see if I can find a fuel setup with lines for sale. As for Fernando, he's gonna take the other side of it. He's gonna go photograph all those parts we just pulled off the car. I'm gonna get them listed online, and we're gonna see just how much of that $45,000 we can get back. It's been a little bit.
Can we finally talk about this?
We can talk about it now.
Cool.
It's been a few days, things are moving, and they're moving fast. Fernando knocked out his part, got everything photoed, and then I got it listed. Of course, the only question left is where did it leave us financially on this heap of shit? No, this is a nice car. I'm not gonna call it that. At this point, I have everything except the fuel parts listed on eBay. That's probably gonna be about another $2,000. But right now, we have just over $25,000 in parts. Keep in mind the engine we took off the shelf for this car was listed at about $30,000. Just to keep it simple, we're gonna say that we paid for that engine with the parts that came from this car. So what might seem like a relatively complicated calculation is still pretty simple. At this very moment, we still have $45,000 into it. Except we did start spending some serious money on it. The very first part that came in for the car, these guys. This is a solid adjustable rod that's gonna replace that hydraulic ram there and fix us right up. Getting just a little more expensive here, you guys saw the shape of that fuel tank before. I said I was gonna try to find a complete stock sealed tank, and we did just that. It ran us $600, but it's gonna make the install 10 times easier. Now, Fernando, you ready to tell them about the real money? As for the engine here, still looks pretty much the same, but it is not. In fact, it's already went to our guys up at AIM Performance, got worked super quickly, and it's back. Unfortunately, most of the stuff they did you can't actually see, but they untimed the engine, pinned the cams. That's a big issue in these. We did already have those welded coolant lines, but being that they had to pull the entire thing apart, they suggested that they just weld their own. That way we know they're good. Those old ones, I had no idea of the quality of the job that was done, so I figured why not be safe instead of sorry. A couple other things. They did manual convert this engine. Almost. One thing they couldn't do is install this manual crank sensor. It's an easy install, it bolts right there. The problem is this line on the manual cars, it kind of swoops out. We don't have that. We might have that. Let me rephrase. We might have that somewhere up there in that parts bin. I have to check, but we didn't send it to AIM, so we need to replace that. And if we don't have one, we're gonna have to order it up. All this work did run us about $5,700. It sounds like a lot of money, but this is must-do kind of stuff, and it's gonna pay dividends on the back end. Not only for the next owner, but when we go to sell it, we're going to be able to command a good bit more money. Even though it cost us a little bit, this engine is good to go. They fully tested it, boost leak, everything. It's solid. Well, except one part. They did find that this passenger diverter valve, which is aftermarket, is leaking. So we had to order a replacement set of those. That ran us another $200. As of right now, that's all we spent. And that brings us to $51,800. We're in a fantastic place on this. I do think that we're probably going to end up somewhere between 55 and 58, depending on what else we need to order. Yeah, we gotta do something about that. If you guys remember from last episode, we picked this car up and the spoiler was level. Then we got the car home and it was not. These 911 turbos have hydraulically actuated spoilers. They raise and lower at a certain speed. It's a really awesome feature when it works. The problem is they fail all the time. And if you can see right there, this one's covered in hydraulic fluid. This is the side that lost pressure. Obviously our issue's right there. It's not super common to fix the actual hydraulics. It's not cheap, it's complicated. So instead I grabbed a set of these. Solid aluminum adjustable mounts. There's nothing to fail on these. They were relatively cheap at just over 300 bucks and supposedly they're pretty easy to install, which all sounds a lot better than having to adjust your spoiler by hand. And even the pump itself is pretty just leaky and nasty. The biggest issue we're gonna have here is this side of the spoiler being all the way down. There's a big spring in this actuator that pulls it down when there's no hydraulic pressure to keep it up. I'm hoping we can rig this up, power this pump, and the system has just enough life left in it to raise this one more time.
I thought you was a pro.
What about this in any way, shape, or form screams pro, all right? Come on. Is that all it gave me? That's all we got. That's not good. I think we're in some trouble here. We're gonna have to force this wing up, jam something in there, and then fight against this spring pressure to twist this wing off. It's not gonna be fun. I think we're gonna be able to make a sandwich out of this level here. We're off to a rocking start. What we need to do is grab that hole right there and twist. That's gonna let us spin off this hydraulic ram from the spoiler. Spoiler comes off, we put our other things on, we're good to go. I thought I was just gonna be able to stick something like this in there, twist it off. We all know where this is going at this point. It obviously didn't work. What we actually need is a spanner wrench like this for a coilover, but just much, much smaller. If I'm being honest, I picked the spoiler to do first because I figured it'd be easy. We'll get on the right track, we'll knock something off, and then move on to the harder stuff. Yeah, let's go hunt down a wrench. A week later, we have the smallest spanner wrench on the planet in hand, and imagine that, the spoiler came right off. With our old hydraulic system out of the way, now it's time for the easy part. It took all of 3 seconds to bolt down the aluminum bases, insert the spoiler mounts, lock them down, and boom. No more leaks, no more outdated hydraulic system. Now the spoiler sits high, it looks amazing, and according to the most accurate level we have at the shop, we nailed the alignment. Being that this car is not going to be a race car like my purple car, there is one more thing we have to do to make sure we don't have any lights on the dash. I'm gonna hack up this wiring harness just a little bit. Our plan here is to pull a little trick on the car and confuse it into thinking it has a functioning hydraulic system, and of course you guys and I know it does not. I think that'll trick the stupid machine. At this point, it just feels good to win one before AI takes over. Now it's time to have some fun. We gotta remove this hacked up stock fuel tank from the car and install this unmodified factory tank with all new fuel lines. These aftermarket lines are way more than we need. And now that the car is going back to stock turbos, they gotta go so we can get the car as close to original as possible. One of the things I loved about working on my 911 turbo was how simple they made everything to drop down. It seems like it holds up for the front as well. If my brain was functioning properly when I took all this apart, the idea is the brakes, the coilovers, all this stuff, it's gonna stay up. The rotor, the hub, the rack, all that's gonna come down with the full front subframe. I think we're loose.
I want to see how many things you actually forget.
There's always something. I genuinely think I got it all because it's pretty simple, but we'll find out. There's not a chance we're counting this loose hanging fuel line, which is not something I forgot because it is disconnected. Trust me, I am no expert, but if my math is correct, that will put us at...
You're right.
I'm right, what?
On this.
Say it.
You're flexing too much right now. The fact that you just put one Porsche together, it doesn't make you a professional yet, okay?
Oh, I'm an amateur.
Yeah.
Hardcore amateur, but an amateur that forgot...
Nothing, zero.
There we go. Let's go ahead and get to what we actually came for. Last episode we did drain this gas tank, got all the E85 out of it, so it should be really light. Maybe we didn't empty it as good as I thought. It's still hung up. I was hoping the wiring harness would drop down with it. That is still connected to the top. But I think we're gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way, by disconnecting things. I guess it really isn't held up. As far as I can tell, everything up here on the top's pretty free. Back up in the air. I think it's just a matter of getting it at the right angle. There we go. That's the only one we can get out right now. If this were a stock line, it would go right here into the top of the hat. The return goes into the side. Don't know how we're gonna get that. I think that's gonna have to come with the tank. Answer a question for me.
Okay.
How do we make the same mistakes every time we work on a car?
It's actually a pretty good question.
You remember the Demon, when we pulled the gas tank down, we forgot something.
Ah, tunnel.
You actually have to fill gas tanks. There's this big hose that goes into the side of them. If you're dropping one, it probably helps to disconnect it. Honestly, can't tell how this is connected. Should probably take a look at the tank we have over there. On the tank in the car, I can't get a great look at it, but it doesn't feel like there's any type of clamp. The best I can tell, it kind of just pushes in. I don't see how that wouldn't leak, though I suppose it is just gravity fed. So if there's some kind of internal seal, maybe that's what we're working with. I think we still can't get all the way out. Oh, there we go. Now I can see very easily why it doesn't leak. That is some deep penetration. What are you laughing at for me? Why are you smiling behind it? Come on, man. Now, if we're lucky, this tank's gonna fall out of here. Directly on my head, actually.
You want to take a shower? E85 shower?
I'd prefer not to. What are we doing here? Come on, that's close. Oh, it's got more gas in it than I thought. For a split second there, I thought we were in trouble. Last episode, we removed this billet dual fuel pump hanger from Silly Rabbit Motorsports. It is a nice assembly, but the install wasn't done very well. So many of these hoses were just popping off. You look at them the wrong way, they're done. One of my biggest pain points on project cars, dealing with fuel issues. The last thing I want to do is be chasing fuel lines popping off left and right. So we simplified it, going with the OEM setup. Not to mention, we're going to recoup like $1,000 selling this stuff. With the questions about the tank pretty much settled, it should be as simple as throwing the other one back up in here. The one issue we're going to have here is the fact that the wiring's been hacked up a bit. I'm going to have to go double check on my car, but this looks like the OEM wiring. It's been modified to a 4-pin connector that connects over here. There's also this massive connector here that's in no way, shape, or form OEM. I believe this is its own harness. We need to make this plug into that. You guys already know where this is going. I don't have this connector. I don't even know if you can buy it. One thing we have going for us though, this harness has more than enough length to reach way up through the fuel pump access panel hole. That way we can install our tank, put all that stuff back in here, and then worry about repinning the OEM connector once we're able to find one. And that's the last of our fuel system. We got the parts, we got the holes. Let's install a fuel tank. There's our new feed. There is our new return. And now we should have a ton of reassembly. can't really consider this a major job, though it was definitely a tedious job. Everything went pretty smooth. We didn't break anything, which is always important. And now, other than that one connector that we still have to source on the top of the fuel hat, from here forward, the car's pretty much done. Obviously, on most cars, saying the front end's done will be a pretty significant achievement. Not on this.
We got major issues. We're missing like a slight important part of the car.
Slight. Keep this between you and me and all them. You guys know that old saying about crime not paying, something along those lines? I think that's the case here. To be fair, the line is only missing out of this car because I stole it from my purple car once we had the issues. Cause of the missing tube aside, we did have to order a new one from Porsche. I was pleasantly surprised to see it was only $107. Not very Porsche-like, is it?
I know, it's weird.
I thought it was gonna be like $4 grand. Being that the theft didn't work out, I suppose it's time to move on to more traditional means of auto mechanicery. We've only tackled half this new fuel line job. We still have to do the rear half. That'll lead to more new parts, which leads to more new parts, which takes us to a used part. If it doesn't make sense now, it will shortly. Up until right about now, I was unsure if I had all the fuel lines I needed. The diagrams for Porsche were fairly unclear. Luckily, we do, sort of. Back here, we have the end of the row for those lines we ran all the way up from the tank. This one here goes into the engine, no big deal. This one's finished. This one up here, however, runs into the stock fuel filter. If you remember though, over here we had an aftermarket fuel system. There was a regulator mounted right there. We don't have that stock fuel filter. No big deal. Order up a stock one. Problem solved, right? Yeah, not quite. The feed side of it from the lines, it's just a quick connect fitting there. No problem, done. Now the other side of it, it's a threaded fitting that needs to go into this. Even a full-fledged YouTube mechanic such as myself knows that's not gonna work. All right, cool. So we need to order one more line. If that big, long, girthy one we threw away a couple minutes ago is only $107, there's no way this little limp dick line is expensive at all, right? 200 bucks for something that I assumed was part of the fuel filter assembly and have definitely thrown away before. Not gonna work. Spend $200 or dumpster dive. Spend $200 or dumpster dive. Kind of a no-brainer. We called up Porsche and ordered a new line. Come on guys, there's not a chance I'm spending 30 minutes digging through a scrap dumpster for a $200 line. Plus, on a car of this caliber, you just can't beat fresh new parts. From the factory, from good old Porsche, our fuel filter is designed to mount right there on the side of the coolant reservoir with a little black bracket. Specifically, this little black bracket. But in typical modified car fashion, of course, they hacked it up just a little bit to mount that aftermarket fuel pressure regulator. Just remember, if you take on a project like this, I guess you would call it a demodification restoration, get used to doing things like this, replacing an otherwise good coolant reservoir just so you can mount something properly. Got the car ready for the engine. Now we need to do the opposite. Fernando, no context whatsoever. What are we installing first? Stock parts or aftermarket parts?
Of course, aftermarket.
Aftermarket.
Yes.
The Go Fast stuff.
Yes.
Literally the Go Fast bits. New bypass valves for a Focus ST.
Wait, what? I thought I was supposed to do them upgrades. This is a Porsche.
Basically the same thing as the Focus ST, apparently. Anyway, last episode, when the engine went up to aim performance, they boost leak tested it in one of these bypass valves. It's leaking internally, no bueno. So now we get to replace this dirty, old, ancient bypass valve with this fancy new thing here.
4 focus parts on a 997. Come on, man.
I don't make the parts, don't blame me. Maybe they mislabeled it. This is definitely a Porsche part. There's our old junkers there. These are some of the original bypass valves for the 997 Turbo. They're huge compared to the newer technology of these ones. It's just a really big unit. One immediate difference, obviously, this one compresses here. These guys, they don't compress. I don't know exactly how these work. This is the one that wasn't technically working or is leaking. You can see the O-ring there is pretty pinched. I do greatly prefer the full face mounting surface of the newer Go Fast bits here. And of course, now that I got talking and forgot which one of these is actually the bad one, I suppose I'm just gonna give them away. I don't know what you're gonna do with them. Hang them in the garage. Maybe you get a good one. Maybe you can put it on your Focus ST. All you gotta do, go down in the comments and say, I want the big one. Fancy new diverter valves installed and ready to go. That's the last of the true aftermarket stuff we have to install to the engine itself. We do have a fancy new clutch in this box, which is kind of a mixed match of OEM parts, but first we got to whip out this guy here. If you watched part 1 of this series, you already know that this is the oil line that comes off the oil cooler and goes down there into the bottom of the crankcase. This donor engine, it's out of an automatic car. Of course, we have to manual convert it, and that means putting this manual specific crank sensor on it. When I tried to do it for the first time, I found that it was hitting this line. They made it just a little bit different on the manual. It has another ½ inch of clearance there to clear the crank sensor. We were incredibly lucky to find that this line was one of the parts that came with the car. While the massive line we threw away earlier was cheap, that smaller fuel line that we were hunting for earlier was fairly expensive. This average or above average line here is obscenely expensive. Lucky for us, we got away without buying it and just cleaned the metal shavings out of the old one. Now, I know I'm no Porsche engineer, but I feel like there may have been an easier way to do this. I don't know, like using the manual ones on the auto cars too. But hey, I'm not here to design them, just break them. Huh, imagine that. Things fit perfectly when you have all the right parts. On the topic of having the correct parts, that's going to come into play here in just another second. This right here, our old clutch. In this box, our fancy new clutch. This is known as the Sax Stage 2.5, something like that. It's a really popular clutch upgrade. You can see this one is a sprung disc, and honestly, it's not in horrible shape. This one is supposed to hold a little more power. As far as I'm aware, the only difference in this clutch setup is this disc here, because if you look over here at the pressure plate, it's the same thing. Same numbers, everything. Are you ready to hold this motor's life in your hands?
No.
You're gonna get a practice run. We're doing 15 foot-pounds the first go around, all right?
Okay.
What you need to do is make sure this motor does not spin at all. It's one thing I learned from AIM. If we spin this backwards, bad things. It can jump time, not good. Now that we've installed one very used but working order flywheel, we can install one very new clutch. Of course, we couldn't forget the premium German lube. Guys, here we are. We got our clutch on, the alignment tool in and out like butter, exactly like you want it. Five minutes and we've already found our first roadblock. First order of business today, connect the engine and transmission. That way it's one big assembly ready to go up in the car. Easy enough. Well, it is easy enough when half your car didn't come in the back of a pickup truck. But given the fact that we buy the dumbest / cheapest stuff possible, this is the situation we find ourselves in. Just for reference, our clutch fork goes right about there. We had to uninstall our clutch fork from the transmission because it goes down here on the release bearing first. Luckily, these two guys were mounted in the transmission, so they didn't really have an opportunity to get lost. But at some point here, when somebody was going through this car, it lost a needle bearing. As of now, we're only down one needle bearing. We can order another one, but if you look right there, that bolt hole, there's a retainer plate that actually holds that pin in. So they might not have reinstalled them in the trans, but they were nice enough to put all this in one place. Here's the plastic cap we're looking for, and here is the retainer bracket. If I recall, this goes over there. This bolts into that bolt hole I showed you guys earlier. I think we all knew that when it came time to put this engine and transmission back in the car, when it came time to actually get it running, we were going to be facing an inevitable battle of missing parts. But hey, that's part of the fun of a project like this, right? Right. We'll call it a minor annoyance at this point, because the beauty of having a car that needs so much work, there's a million other things we can work on until the bearing gets here. Including this, which is something I thought was about to be a massive struggle. Last episode, we removed a super complex aftermarket fuel setup from the car. It was a billet hanger, dual fuel pumps. It was an awesome setup, but they had to hack the car up pretty well to install it. In fact, it was so modified, it went as far as to order a full stock replacement gas tank fuel pump hanger, something that had never been open. We had to order all new lines all the way to the back of the car. The one thing we're left with, the one thing we haven't been able to replace, this connector here. This 4-pin connector plugged into that aftermarket hanger. We had grounds running up to relays up there. Unfortunately, it's not going to cut it with the stock hanger. After a ton of research, as far as I'm aware, you can't order just this connector. My only option was to order an entire wiring harness. Now, before I went and spent a ton of money on a brand new harness for one connector, I remembered something the previous owner said to me just before I pulled off with the car. He said, hey, I have another box of parts in my attic. Do you want them? As car guys, we know the only answer to that question is absolutely. After stressing over that harness for quite some time, I did remember there was an old broken fuel hanger assembly in there. And of course, it does have the original connector on it. I was truly sweating this. Even though these things are cut down short, we have the pins, we have the plastic connector. I'm sure we can make this work. Alrighty then. I gotta say, I've never taken apart one of these connectors before, and it was way easier than I expected. I've tried some other stuff on Audis and Porsches. They've never been fun. This one, not too bad. I went and cut a connector off another car that uses the same style connectors. The colors aren't gonna match, but at this point, I'd rather have these OEM connections. We'll cut it with enough pigtail to splice onto our wiring harness over here, and I think that should set us straight. Yeah, when I started this about an hour ago, this isn't exactly what I imagined I'd have in my hand at the end of it, but hey, I suppose it ain't dumb if it works. There we are. Trust me, I know in the grand scheme of things, this seems super trivial. When we're putting together an entire car like this, one connector, not the biggest deal in the world. But if you've ever been in a position where you have an issue and you simply don't know how you're gonna solve it, then all of a sudden, a couple hours later, it's completely resolved, you know exactly how big of a win this is. Now we can move on to some stuff that's a lot more fun than wiring a fuel pump. Okay, so technically needle bearings don't classify as more fun, but hey, it's a necessary evil. And big ol' shout out to our guys at Pelican Parts for getting us this overnight so we can get back on with our engine trans install. You're not gonna believe it, but these transmissions are only mounted with 4 bolts. 1, 2, same on the other side, 3, 4. Most of the cars that I deal with, and I presume you guys deal with, unless you're Porsche guys, have 6 or 8 bolts. I don't think it's a stretch to give Porsche the benefit of the doubt. They knew what they were doing here. Every bit of this car is super serviceable, except the long block. That terrifies me. If there was one part of this transmission job that is a bit tricky, it's this guy right here. You might have been wondering what I was doing with this stuff here. Why did I have the clutch fork taped to the pressure plate? Well, that's so it doesn't do 180 degrees and fall straight down. We have it aligned the right way. Now we need to get this pin in there without losing any more needle bearings. If in the next minute or so you guys hear a lot of, you know exactly what happened. If you couldn't envision what I was showing on the tool bench earlier, there it is, easy enough. Now speaking of easy, this slave cylinder. It's a GT2 one. I mentioned that earlier in the series. The kit is about $1,200. It might seem like a lot of money, especially since this just looks like a slave cylinder. Well, the stock one, that doesn't look like a slave cylinder. It's this massive monstrosity. It runs off Pentosan, looped in with the power steering pump. It's a wreck. Any manual 997 turbo, you need this. Finally, a look at the full assembly that's getting ready to go into the car. It took a day longer than expected, but hey, progress is progress. Not only is that one major step knocked out, but it also allows us to make progress on this mess of parts over here. While there is some stuff like this drive shaft here that we definitely need to keep, the gaskets not so much. This other engine that we pulled off the shelf was so complete, it means we can sell a lot of this stuff and recoup a decent bit of money. The idea is that after putting in all this time, effort, and money, that once this thing's wrapped up, we're gonna be in that car a lot cheaper than we could have just went and bought one from the jump for. And if not, I guess it was a good learning experience.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
You ready?
Yeah, feels familiar.
It does feel familiar. When did we become certified Porsche guys?
Can we call us like that?
That is a good point. We went from messing with Corvettes and Camaros to people telling us we're saying Porsche wrong.
It's Porsche. We all know that,
What
right?
was that?
Porsche.
You did something else there. I don't know what that was.
It's our terminology.
Porsche.
Of this shop.
Porsche. Anyway, it's about time to do this again. Hopefully now that we've got one install under our belts in the purple car, this one's going to go a little smoother. One quick note before we meet these two guys together. This is my first time seeing these aftermarket intercoolers. We knew they were aftermarket. We could see it up from the top, but I still don't see any markings on them. It does look like a nice set of intercoolers. They're pretty thick cores. They look quality, bar and plate, but I don't know what they are.
But it's actually something wrong with it.
No carbon fiber.
Yeah, there you go.
Devil's advocate here, I'm sure these were a lot cheaper than the monsters from Do 88 that I put on my car. And this car, well, actually, maybe it could have benefited from big intercoolers. All right, I take that back. Intercooler talk aside, go ahead and lay this thing down on the drivetrain. Let's see what happens.
Are you shooting some point?
Nope. Looks good.
That's your mission point?
Yeah, right there. I will say one thing we picked up from the purple car is knowing not to put the starter on first. The trans bolts are in. Now we just gotta let those studs down there slide into the hole and we're home free. Well, that legitimately was 15 minutes.
We're pros.
Well, the thumbs were going the wrong way. There you go. You know, I wouldn't by any stretch of the imagination call us professionals at this point, but I do think we learned a thing or two from the disaster that was the purple car. If you happen to not be around for the last build, Porsche's made this stuff so easy. Other than the physical long block, everything is so simple. Now it's just a matter of connecting the dots. We hook up a few easy things, and we get to hang this awesome straight pipe exhaust. Yeah, I'm not gonna say this has happened before, but I'm also not gonna say it hasn't. One of our shifter cables up there is trapped between the trans tunnel and the transmission. I believe we're gonna have to lower this down a little bit to free it up. We're back home. Man, in the grand scheme of things, I know it's kind of small, but it's been quite some time since this thing's been able to row through the gears. Now's about the time we have to start digging through this bin and hoping we have enough parts to mesh this engine with this chassis. So far, it's been pretty much putting together Legos. Fingers crossed it continues. One of the first things I noticed, the coolant hose on the end of this hard line that gets coolant from here all the way and up and over to the engine, severely different on an automatic. Luckily, the stuff we had in the old parts bin here from the manual car checks out. It's all in good shape, so crisis averted for now. Next up, the shaft. And I did have a momentary scare here. I didn't see hardware anywhere for this thing. But then I remembered the shop that tore this thing down after the failure did us a solid, at least one, and stuck the hardware in these boxes. It's all labeled, and I presume right here is our drive shaft hardware. It wasn't the easiest to get it in, but it is in. And we've got ourselves the right hardware. I'm just gonna go ahead and assume right now that we're getting set up for a massive letdown later, but for the time being, things are going pretty damn smooth. There we go. As far as the bottom's concerned, we've pretty much done everything we need to do to start it. Now, don't get me wrong, we still have to hit it from the back in the top, but I don't see us having any problem finishing. Truthfully, I thought we were gonna have a really big issue with missing parts, hardware, connectors, whatever. It turns out we got really lucky. The only pair of parts we're missing, the turbo to intercooler hoses. Of course, this car did have a pretty nasty turbo kit on it back in the day when it was making 1,000 horsepower for, 300 miles. So I'm assuming these were trashed long ago. We are gonna have to scramble to find a set of those because unfortunately we don't have any in the shop. If you've watched the channel for any amount of time, you know we're quite spoiled here. We can generally take whatever parts we need directly off the shelves. Unfortunately, not the case this time. Now the games begin.
Are you sure that's the right position?
I'm not playing the games with you. I meant the games trying to line it up. Yes, it's the right position. Misjudged that exhaust a little bit. Yeah, it's hanging like 6 inches lower than the rest of the car, and I didn't realize it until this moment. I need some nuts, please. There's no other way to say it. Fernando, can you please hand me the hardware for this exhaust?
Okay, can you say
Nope.
like the next sentence?
Hardware, please. As is the case with almost every one of these, like half the studs, or in this case, 75% of the studs are missing from the turbo.
Do you think this car should be louder than yours?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's both straight pipe exhaust, no cats, no mufflers, which is the right way to run a Porsche. We are going to have ourselves a ton of adjustment here to make sure these tips line up in the bumper well, but we can knock that out in a little bit. As for now, we move on to what should be the easy part of this, just reassembling the engine bay. I gotta say that went much easier than expected. Sometimes with aftermarket exhausts, they don't line up the best. This one's easily adjustable, it looks great in the bumper, you really can't complain about it. I love that they went with the GT2 style tips, just like I used on my car as well. Some people don't like this in the turbo bumper. Personally, me, I'm a big fan. During the install though, I did run into one more thing we're missing. So in addition to these hoses here, which we still need to source, we don't have rear O2 sensors. Being that this car was built, the exhaust just has block offs in there. I was hoping that they came with the car. Unfortunately, they did not. Of course, one of the first things I found we're missing were a bunch of these guys. They secure the coolant hoses to the engine and they're missing all over. Fortunately though, saving them's paid off. We almost made it. I was getting ready to put the Y pipe in. Everything has went super smooth so far. It's taken roughly 30 minutes just plugging stuff in, but as luck would have it, there is gonna be one single thing that stops us from slapping this together completely. That bottom line on the coolant reservoir goes over here to this metal line. Unfortunately, we ain't got it. We had a glimmer of hope way up there on the shelves. I found one of these guys. It's the same coolant reservoir we have. It's the same 996 part number. The hose is on it. Great, awesome, we're good to go. Yeah, not so fast. This is a 997 part number. It just so happens this is out of a 997.2 with the new motor. Clearly, I wish we could have lucked out on that, but no bueno. I'm not gonna sweat it because finishing up the engine bay is gonna go something like this. Acquire hose, install hose, slap on Y pipe, slap on airbox. Oh, and of course we'll have to plug in the MAF and the Y pipe sensor and all that stuff. But either way, we are close. We have to hunt down a few parts, fill it with fluid, and I think we crank it up. You guys know that old saying about blessings in disguise? So while we're waiting on the couple parts we need, I got to thinking, is there anything else that's gonna prevent us from starting it? And there is. It's been a minute since I've been through the paperwork on this car. So long, in fact, that I forgot that it had a Cobb access port. That's obviously tuned for the big injectors, the big turbos, the built motor. Clearly not gonna work for what we're doing. The problem is that device wasn't included with the car, so we can't just plug it in and flash it back to stock. You already know where we're sending it. Our guys at AIM Performance, they got all the latest firmware from Porsche. They're gonna flash it on the car and it should be back today. Perfect timing. I'm excited to see this thing back. Let's all collectively cross our fingers. If I have anything to say about it, this is the last time this car is gonna see a tow truck under my ownership. Not only that, actually, once we get it down and push it in the shop, it should be the last time we have to push this car around.
Are you actually ready for this?
I'm ready.
Ready?
I've been ready. I was ready 3 days ago, and I suppose we do have to talk about that. This whole ordeal, sending it up to AIM, did take a little longer than we originally anticipated. When I sent the car up, they had all the codes needed to do it. Unfortunately, we ran into a little bit of an issue. To flash these cars to stock, the ECU needs to be properly VIN numbered to the car. It's not a problem if it hasn't been swapped out before. Of course, you probably know where I'm going with this one. This one had been swapped out at some point. Of course, because they are who they are and they're Porsche legends, they got it taken care of once they got the correct codes. And not only that, they helped us out in a few other ways that I'll show you once we get it inside. But quickly, before we do that, guys, King's Transport and Towing, if you're in the Mid-Atlantic, Maryland, give them a look. They've helped me out more times than I can count. I got the call that this car car was done like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It's here less than 24 hours later. They sent the truck up, picked it up last night, and got it to me ASAP. If you've been paying attention, you're probably aware of the fact that I've been pressing to get this car together. It hasn't ran in God knows how long. I'm kind of sick of it. I want to hear it run. I want to drive it. So when I figured out I was going to have to sit at aim for a little bit, I figured it would be wise to have them do a little work to it while it was there. When we sent this car out of here, didn't have that hose on it right there. It definitely didn't have coolant in it, and it also didn't have oil in it. I know you can't see it, but you're gonna have to take my word for it. That's right, the coolant is full, the coolant's bled, and probably most importantly, they've already checked it for oil pressure. So even though we had some unexpected downtime, we made the best use of it. Now we should theoretically be able to put on our Y-pipe, put on our airbox, and start the car. And if I don't seem confident about that, there's a reason. Yeah, our intercooler pipes. We still don't have those.
Oh, they're Bluetooth connected.
Okay, in theory that works, but I have talked with the guys at AIM. Apparently, as long as we leave the MAF sensors disconnected, we can still start it. Putting an airbox in is a first for me. It's not the nicest thing to do. There's not a ton of space in here. Luckily with my car, we just, stuck filters on the end of the turbo. That just pushes down. It's not the hardest install I've ever done. I think these vents just press against it, hold it in place, which if you didn't know that's how this car works, it's pretty awesome. If you see the grooves on there, they're made to go into a different type of hose. This is an aftermarket silicone coupler. I think we're in. Nope, we're not. Ooh, there we go. We're on team. How do you think this is gonna go?
I don't know. Can we trust it?
We can trust it. I mean, look at the engine bay. The engine bay looks legitimate. It looks done. It looks like a pretty complete car. When we get under it, or when we get up here to the front, where there's no battery, no fuel tank cover, no whatever that cover is, it looks like a giant mess. I don't know that I would trust that, but I'm pretty positive there's nothing that's going to prevent it from starting, except a jump box.
Oop.
Let's do it.
It's the first guy that you fix right, that you don't modify it.
So that is
Can we do
weird.
that?
We've talked about that 10 times here. It's still really weird to me that we took this car from just being a blown up 1,000 horsepower mess to stock. It's just not the way I operate. It feels alien to me. Fernando, crank it up. Let's hear this stock beast come to life, hopefully.
Wow, you say that. You didn't say the other
Just
part.
stop it. Come on, man. What are you doing? Crank her up.
We need a battery.
Let's order a battery.
Sounds like a Porsche.
To be fair, I was going to go get a battery later today. I just got antsy. I wanted to start it. It is not a light battery. Or a convenient position, if we're being honest. And I put it in f***ing backwards. Alright. Whoops. Damn it.
If you got a Porsche and you need a battery replace, please call Lee. He's gonna take care of that.
Rent an engine hoist.
The whole air system is gonna work.
It should. There's no reason why it won't. But frankly, I have not looked into that at all yet. I just want to get the thing started. It's been a long time coming. And then next episode, we'll do everything we need to do to get this working, running, driving 100%. Fernando, we got a battery. Please start the car.
You ready for this?
I am. Well, that was way easier than expected.
We got no fuel.
You're not lying. We literally have no fuel. Wow. Okay.
Oil pressure.
Oil pressure's good. I can hear it clear as day. I'm sure you guys can too. There is some belt noise in there, but otherwise this sounds really quiet. All right, be honest with me here. Did you think that was gonna go like that smoothly? It just cranked up? No. I thought it was gonna be an ordeal like my car was, for reference. That was so easy that I almost feel like I'm not appreciating this moment enough. There's nothing flying out from under the car. It's not leaking. Stay in there in case I yell, all right? I know this is a completely different reaction from when I started my car for the first time, but this just went way too easy. I do suppose the fact that they pressure tested everything in AIM helps this. We didn't have to chase down any leaks. We would have known about it if one was coming for us, but still, this feels suspiciously easy. Listen to it now. I think that noise was just because this engine itself hasn't been started in so long. Forget the car. We don't know when the last time this engine was started is. Is it up to temp now?
I think we're Gucci 175.
That's about what it should be. We gotta start building more stock cars, man. This is too smooth. Like, we can go home now. We're good.
I like that turbo noise.
Sounds good. All right, shut it down. No intercooler pipes, no fuel, no problem. Just put that on a t-shirt.
Sounds like a vacuum cleaner.
It sounds good. You know it sounds good.
It's probably the best sounding Porsche in the shop yet.
Nah, there's no way, right? He couldn't have been talking about this one. He must have forgot about that, and he was talking about the Macan GTS, the paint to sample, lightly crashed one that will be a project on the channel soon. I mean, I'm not gonna not plug it. So look, I know we just heard this thing run for the first time in years. It should be a very joyful moment, right?
Yes.
Think we get a little more power out of this thing?
We just talk about it. It's supposed to
This
be a
is
stock.
boring. I'm bored already. We gotta do something with it. Maybe throw those turbos back on it. See if we can manage not to blow it up. Make like a nice solid 800 horsepower. Or maybe we just enjoy it like this for a little bit first. I don't know. We still have a lot of work to do as it sits to get it on the road. I don't want to drive it out to the shop today. We'll save that for next episode. I want to make sure we have the intercooler pipes on there. I want to make sure everything is flawless. Old habits really want to kick in here. It just all feels too easy, but I think we're going to enjoy this car stock for a little bit. It's got to be an awesome experience.
And the best part is going to be seeing the comparison between your car and this car.
Put it in the comments. Give us some early ideas. What should we do with these two cars? And we need some creative ideas. We can't drag race them. That's not a thing.
No.
We can take them to Tail of the Dragon.
That would be awesome experience.
And I feel that that's overdue because somewhere on this car, I gotta find it. It's a black sticker on a tinted window. Over there. Thank you for helping me out with that. This car's already been the Tail of the Dragon. There's more proof right there. I think it needs to go back. Don't let my genuine confusion about how this all just went so easy distract you from the fact that I'm really f***ing excited about how this turned out. Our intercooler pipes are due to be here 2 days from now. We do have a ton of finishing work. We have to check the car over from top to bottom. Check things like this front axle lift system to make sure it's working, as Fernando said earlier. We're far from done. This typically, for me at least, ends up being the hardest part of a build sometimes. Call it being naive. Maybe it's just a hunch. But since this all went so well, I think we're going to be in for a pretty easy time.
You did it.
I know. As soon as it came out of my mouth, that was our Bluetooth intercooler pipes. Even though we have a lot left to do, this was the only thing that truly stopped us from driving it last episode. I wasn't even positive we were going to be able to start the car. Of course, you know, we did get it done even though we had the map sensor and map sensor unplugged. Honestly, I was kind of impressed at how well it ran considering everything we had missing and or unplugged. While it did run okay, there was an absolute 0% chance it was going to make it down the road like that. But of course, yesterday, FedEx dropped by with a very welcome package in the form of our brand new intercooler pipes. This is going to take all 3 seconds to install, but on the flip side, this is where things can actually go south. We're no longer going to be tricking the car into running with unplugged sensors. We have to make it run and run right. After how easy that first start went, I'm trying my best to not get overconfident, not get cocky, and assume that driving it's going to go the same way. Giving it the pipe check?
Oh, and pipes.
I know.
Come on.
I know. Now that it's coming time to start this for real, I'm almost thinking maybe we cheated our way into an easy first start. What if we plug all these sensors in and things just go south?
You just say
It's
it.
possible.
Like, why did you just say it?
I'm thinking that maybe if I acknowledge that it's a possibility, it won't happen. That's how that works, right?
I don't think that's how it works.
That's how it's gonna work today. If it does anything other than just fire right up like last time, I'm gonna lose it. What were we worried about? I knew it was fine all along. Overall, just like last time, it sounds really healthy still. It does bug me, and I know some of you guys are noticing it too, how dirty the engine is compared to the rest of the car that's cryoblasted. But I suppose that's not really what we need to be worrying about right now. There's no leaks that I can tell. Remember, the car is already full of fluids. I did expect to at least have some kind of an issue now that we had all the sensors plugged in. I didn't think things were gonna go quite so smoothly, but it looks like I may have just been wrong.
I find a problem. We need fuel.
How low are we? Oof. You remember what happened last time I was that low in a Porsche? Yeah, let's go get gas. I do recognize the irony here.
Can you believe they're using that gas tank for normal fuel and no E85?
Never gonna hear the end of this whole return to stock thing, am I? My original plan was to drive this car to the gas station for its first drive, but with my track record. Now that we have a functioning check engine light system in this car, it's probably wise to go ahead and plug it in and see how pissed off it is. It looks like pretty much every single code is O2 sensor related, which, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, makes perfect sense because I forgot to install the rear O2 sensors. Let me back up for a second. What I meant to say was I forgot to order the rear O2 sensors, so we're gonna steal them. I'm not even positive that my car needs rear O2 sensors, so I'm happy to pull them out. At this point, I'm not letting anything stop us from driving that yellow car today. I'll do anything, including theft. Feel free to roast me for working with an adjustable, but I don't have a 22 that's small enough. Ready for attempt number 2?
He's gonna be perfect.
Nah, good enough. Check engine light's gone so far. Just try to put it in gear.
He's just testing the transmission.
Just testing the transmission. All right, got it. Slick recovery, I like that. But when Fernando's not putting it in gear unannounced, everything sounds pretty healthy. That little bit of squeaking we had in the last episode when we started it for the first time seems to be gone completely. I am pretty positive that was just the belt having some age to it. The pulleys were all rusted up, you know the drill. As of now though, she sounds really good. I mean, we got gas, we don't have any check engine lights at this very moment.
She wants to go to the street.
The street?
Yeah.
Well, there was some other stuff we needed to do first. I had every intention to fully complete this car before we take it for the first drive. It just never works out that way.
It's actually smarter to do it because that way you can identify weird noises.
Exactly. We can see if there's a leak, the under panels aren't on. It will be a pain to come back and get it on the lift, but hey, the sacrifices we make for quality. Quality assurance, not impatience.
She's moving.
It's not a question of if it's gonna move, it's how well's it gonna move. I'm gonna do a lap around the building. If I'm not back in 15 seconds, there's a problem. It feels pretty good. You know what that means?
1 to 10.
9.
Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah, that's probably one because I haven't got it. It feels really good. It sounds awesome. Fernando, get in.
How would the brakes feel?
Not as good as I would expect. Same thing on my purple 911 Turbo. Maybe some of you guys can chime in if you're familiar with the 997 Turbo platform. None of the ones I've driven have ever felt nearly as good as the GT4 I built. The brakes on this car, carbon ceramic. The brakes on my purple car, steel. So I don't know what the common denominator is. They just don't feel great. We're gonna consider this the short loop. This is just testing it out. We're not going out on the highway yet. We'll wait till it's fully wrapped up to do that. But this thing drives. It drives well.
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't be surprised. It's a stock car. Why would it not drive well? Wow.
That's way faster than what I expect.
Me too. That
Oh
was
my
good.
god. Whoa.
That feels amazing.
Wow.
And that's just a little second gear rip. Holy crap. I did not expect that. It's not fast, but it's way faster than I thought it was going to be.
Exactly. Especially
Wow.
that's everything is stock, you know?
Everything except exhaust, bone stock.
Yes.
Now we got to get this thing back on the lift like right away. I mean, right this minute. Get this thing wrapped up and really take it for a rip.
Yes.
Holy shit. I didn't mean to lie to you guys, but I'm so impressed with this car that I just can't help but get the #1 Porsche hater in the shop into the car before we get it back over there. So you better hop in. You're going to be impressed.
Two things. This thing is not quiet at all.
Really?
I could hear you everywhere that you went, which kind of surprised me because sitting here idling, it doesn't make a lot of like engine noise. It's got a lot of turbo noise, but out there you can hear it plain as day from miles away, I would assume. Number two, along the lines of turbo noise, this thing almost has as much as the Juke.
Oh
Almost.
my God.
I remember the first 996 that I rode in, 996 turbo, and I remember being like astounded at the torque, more or less.
I've never been in one, ever. Tell me that's not impressive.
It does roll, and like, the thing with these cars, as much crap as I talk on the way they sound, they make gobs of torque. Speechless is almost the word, that it can make that much power out of a 6-cylinder.
One more note, I need a numeric racing shifter. It's the next thing I'm going to order for my car. Even with the first drive in the books, the underside of the car is still completely dry. I don't want to jinx it yet. I don't want to speak too soon, but we're looking good. The good news here, unlike my car, these under panels are in phenomenal shape. They're not all cracked up. They look fairly new. The bad news is we're missing a ton of hardware. We're tapped out. We don't even have the full front section installed. We still have to put all that on. And not only that, but as is quite obvious, we're missing an entire under panel. Maybe it didn't come with the car. Maybe I stole it from my purple car long ago. I don't know. The details are unimportant.
It's literally right there, bro. It's literally right there, bro.
The hardware, I'm not worried about it. This is where all that hoarding we've done over the past year and all the other 911s we've parted out comes in handy. But as for the missing under panel, the under panels, they're done, at least as done as they're gonna be until we get that last one from our guys at Delaware Porsche Parts. Next up on the agenda, this thing right here. This is what should be a pretty awesome system. It's by Car Graphics. It's a front axle lift kit. That is an OEM option on a lot of the newer high-end RS cars. I don't believe it was on these older ones, or if it is, it's not very common. How this fancy thing works. This is the control box right here. This is teed off to the top of each strut, which there's an airbag. This other airline runs all the way down there to a compressor that's hidden under that amplifier. Even the wiring's pretty simple. You have your power, you have your ground. You do have this that runs over here to the ABS. I believe that's where it picks up speed. It does have an automatic lowering feature at I think 30 miles an hour, 50 kilometers. One would think this whole setup would run off a simple switch on the inside of the car. Unfortunately, no. They decided to design it around a remote which we don't have, and unlike that under panel, I didn't steal this one. This company's based out of Europe, so I sent them an email. I'm hoping we can adapt it to run off a regular switch, or we can source another remote. I don't know how old this kit is. I don't know if they even make them anymore. Either way, for now, it looks like we're gonna have to deal with it just raising and lowering by speed, which, if you ask me, kind of defeats the whole purpose of this entire setup.
We're probably gonna be scratching the front bumper because it's really hollow. We're supposed to go up and down, you know.
Exactly, that's how it's supposed to work. I'll see a speed bump coming, Fernando's laying in the middle of the road, I don't know. I just want to raise it up so I don't bust my lip when I run into something.
Wow.
Well, that might not have worked out exactly how I wanted it to. I do suppose now that we've driven it a little bit, and we're about to drive it some more, it is time for the ceremonial removing of the tow hook and installation of the tow hook cap. That is not as easy as I wanted it to be. There we go. Just how I drew it up. I really wanted to button up this whole front. I wanted to put all the interior back in. I wanted to have the airlift solve. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. We are going to have to wait until we hear back from Car Graphic and figure out what we can do about that. But of course, there's an absolute 0% chance we're letting anything small like this get in the way of us driving it. I think we're already gushing over this, but the way this car sounds for being a stock car with an exhaust, awesome. this car, and you're gonna laugh. How much do you think it would cost to install one of these bad boys in my car?
Just sell it and get another one.
Yeah. If you haven't been around, I cut the roof off my car, got rid of the sunroof, and put a carbon fiber roof on it. But hey, it's not half bad. Usually stock cars do not live up to the hype whatsoever. This one does. Not what I expected at all.
Now we can understand why everybody loves 997 turbos.
And this might be the first time that I've ever said this. And it's not going to be a habit, I promise you guys that. I can see why somebody would buy this car and not want to modify it. I really can. The driving aspect that does it for me is being able to lay into the throttle just a little bit, 25%, and feel the turbo do the work. It's a different dynamic from a naturally aspirated car that's directly correlated to what your foot's doing, and I just find it cool. It's never got old to me, and what? How old am I? I guess 17 years of driving.
It feels just fast enough where you can enjoy the car.
Exactly, and we've only done this on like straight line type stuff.
Yeah.
I will drop the news now. This will be the last video for this car on the channel. The build's complete, even though we have a couple minor things, some of which we're gonna address when we get to the shop. But as far as the build, it's just done. It runs awesome, it's perfect. We do have to see how much, if any, money we're gonna make on this thing, which is a story for a little bit later. But I am taking this to Tail of the Dragon in a few weeks. Until I either decide what I want to do with this car or sell it, I will keep you guys updated on my personal channel about all the goings on with this, of course including all the fun we have in it. Exactly. Oh, and of course, links in the description, so go subscribe. Can't leave that part out. Whoa! Amazing. Hey, you remember when we did a first gear pull in my car
Yes.
not that long ago? And it hit a ghost rev limit at about 6,000. It did it again.
Yes. What is that?
I don't know. I guess it's a Porsche thing that I thought something was wrong with my car.
Huh.
Roll the clip.
How do you feel about the shifting on this? Like, do you feel a big difference between this and your car?
This feels like I don't have that issue with the throttle body closing. This feels like I can shift it faster than I can my car. Well, if our reactions weren't enough, first test drive just awesome. Can't ask for any more. We did get one more check engine light though. I don't think it's the O2 sensors, but I suppose it's about time to find out.
We should worry about that code?
Depends what it is. I'll let you know if we have to worry about it in about 2 seconds. Well, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, and that makes sense. These 4 codes specifically are just kind of the name of the game when it comes to putting an exhaust on your car like that. So fortunately, we do get to ignore them, Fernando. We don't have to worry about them.
I like that.
Now, there is one more thing that happened to the car while we're sitting in a little bit of traffic that I think we do have to worry about. Which did go away before we pulled in here, that this fan isn't working. It said engine compartment fan, fault, failure, something like that. And it's plugged in. So the only thing that leads me to believe is maybe the fan itself's bad. Truthfully, I'm not sure exactly how bad this is for the car if it's not working, but I surely don't want to see that come up on the dash, so I think it's top of the list to get fixed. If that's the biggest issue we have with this car during an entire rebuild, I mean,
That's a big win.
we can't complain. Hop on in, you're up.
Is it faster than the purple or it feels about the
It's
same?
clearly not faster than the purple, but I do have feelings when it comes to this versus my purple car, which we'll go over when we're back to the shop, and it's probably not where you expect I'm going with it. There's that warning. It did it again while we're sitting in traffic for about 5 minutes. We gotta take care of that ASAP.
We're gonna turn it off one time?
You cannot stall this car. This car is easy to drive.
Wow.
Fernando's had a few issues in my car.
Porsche issues.
Well, firing up, dog.
Okay.
See, it's just so good. Unless the exhaust and intercoolers that are on this car are making that big of a difference, to think you should buy one of these off the dealership floor, awesome.
We need to fix it.
We're not there yet. You got to give your official uncertified, I know
like
I'm
that.
plugging you too, rating on this car.
It's
Really
awesome.
good.
I can say 10 out of 10.
I think I truly agree. As weird as that is to say, I really think this is a 10 out of 10 car. And maybe my expectations on mine are a little high because I built it, But at this point, I say mine's a 9, not even a 10. So I think this car might be a little more enjoyable to drive than mine. Of course, there are just some very small issues with mine we have to get worked out, and then it'll be much better. I hope. Most everything going on with this car, dashboard-wise, the lights, it's all kind of just nonsense. This fan's definitely not. So this is the one thing I am pretty set on fixing right now. Our two options here is either it's the fan or whatever controls the fan. Actually not what I wanted to see there. I was hoping the fan was just dead. It looks like we have to dig a little deeper. I'm hoping this not so fancy piece of hardware here is gonna let us do it. It's a simple cable, it's called Durametric. No doubt if you're into Porsche stuff, you've probably heard about it. This lets us connect and activate all kinds of controls within the car, and I'm hoping that we can activate that fan. It's incredibly simple, but it's a really useful tool when you're troubleshooting stuff like this. For example, if you have a problem with your wiper motor, you can click this and find out that it's your switch, not your motor. Another example, if you're winning an airbag, clicked activations, there's things in here you can click and probably just blow all the airbags in the car. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Yeah, so everything I just said to you, it was pretty much a lie. On the 996s, you can activate that fan back there. On the 997s, you can only activate the radiator fan. So we're gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way. This is the reading for the temperature of the engine compartment. There's a little sensor that sits right in the intake manifold. Once this heats up to, I believe, 84 degrees, it's gonna try to kick that fan on. When it presumably doesn't come on, it's gonna flash that warning, and then we'll know that there's something in the system that activates it that failed. Even under 80 degrees Celsius, we have a flashing warning above the coolant temp, and right there, failure of engine compartment blower warning. So now that we verified without a doubt that it isn't coming on, we get to figure out why. From the little bit of research I've done, the most common failure point here is a fuse that's way back there under the rear seats in the subwoofer box. Specifically that blue fuse right there. Unfortunately, it didn't cut it. We also swapped out the relays for that fan, didn't work. We checked every single fuse down there, also didn't work. That's when we had to start looking elsewhere. And one piece of auxiliary information we had is we also had a warning for this third brake light. So now that we've got rid of our active hydraulics, the only two items on the deck lid, fan, third brake light, both not working, which led me to check the harness. And it's gonna be near impossible to show you the connection because it's kind of deep inside the car, but I believe that this isn't pushing in all the way. I've already straightened all the pins. I've checked both connectors. They look fine. I went over and checked my purple car, and that trunk harness is definitely seated further into the chassis side connector than this one is. That feels like it's correct. So I would show you what just happened here, but I'm definitely not disconnecting it again. The purple retainer clip, whatever, in the trunk side harness shifted back and forth. I shifted it one direction and it finally slid in after doing that thing 5 times previously. So I'm pretty sure I hear it working now. It's not nearly as noticeable as when the trunk lid's open, and it won't work when the trunk's open. So Pete, what I'm gonna have you do is pop that trunk. I'm gonna rip it open and see if we can catch it still spinning to verify it works. All right, well that problem's down. This just doesn't feel right. This isn't how YouTube's supposed to go. This is the point where I'm supposed to say, oh no, it blew up, or we don't have oil pressure. Yeah. There feels like there was supposed to be a lot more drama here, and there simply wasn't. Every single step of the way, this project has just went suspiciously smooth. From the first start, to the first drive, to the first pull, everything's just worked. That's never, ever, 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 as I'm sure most of you guys can attest to, how projects like this go.
So it's just the fact because it's a stock and it's a Porsche, or it's just because the fact that we're working on stock cars again?
Well, Porsche obviously doesn't mean anything because look behind you. What a disaster that thing was.
But it was aftermarket.
14-month-long nightmare. So I'm leaning towards it just being a factor of us putting together a stock car. And fortunately, we had all the right parts. We had all the right good quality OEM parts. We didn't try to cheap out on anything. I think we just for once did everything exactly how you're supposed to do it, and it paid off. I can't say enough good stuff about this car, from the driving experience to how easy the project was. There is one massive remaining question though, and if we get inside and total up the financials on this car, and we're in it for $80,000, which let me go on record right now and say I don't think that's the case by any stretch. But if the numbers aren't in our favor on this, then it's gonna paint this car in a whole different light. So I suppose it's time we go find out. When I first started going through all these expenses, I thought it was gonna be kind of a monumental task. It did not turn out that way. What better place to start than with the big one, the car. $45,000, we've known that from the jump. I still feel like we got a fantastic deal on it. Regardless of how this whole project turned out, just knowing what we paid for and what we could have sold the shell for along with all the parts we got, it was a solid deal from the jump. Now that massive truckload of parts that came along with it, it was an insane amount of value there. In fact, once we listed all those parts, once we got everything off the car, out of the truck bed, and put them on eBay Motors, we had $27,500. Every single penny of that $27,500 was wiped away by the fact that we had to buy a motor out of inventory. I know multiple times during this series I've said we just snatched one off the shelves. Obviously this is a business, it doesn't work that way. It was a retail $30,000 engine, so I just called it even. And now's where we start adding some real expenses. AIM Performance round one. We had to send that motor up to them, they pinned the cams, they welded the coolant lines, they made sure that engine was good to go. They gave us a manual crank sensor, they did a bunch of maintenance to it to make sure whoever buys this car is gonna drive it pretty much worry-free for the next 100,000 miles. All that maintenance did come at a price. Pinning the cams isn't exactly the easiest thing. It cost us $5,700. And then we had to start ordering some parts. One of the most obvious things we had to fix throughout this entire process, that crooked ass spoiler. $300 for those solid billet aluminum wing mounts. I'm sure most of you guys remember that disaster of a fuel tank. We yanked that aftermarket fuel system out. The inside of it was a wreck. So I went out and sourced a unmodified, unopened in fact, fuel tank that we could just stick right in the car and be on our way. It did cost us $600, however. That fuel tank, even though it wasn't cheap, I do think we were able to get a deal on it, being that we bought it used, and if we were to buy all those parts new, it would have probably been 3 times that cost. Speaking of buying new fuel parts, the fuel lines. We had to order every single fuel line front to rear. Feed and return, it was 4 total pieces. Oh, and a fuel filter for $900. This next part here, we're gonna call it missing when really it was stolen by me. The coolant hard line. $430. Yeah, nothing else to say about that one. Round 2 at AIM Performance. When we sent the car back up there, they had to do some tricky stuff with the ECU to get the stock map back on it. Now the car's emissions compliant. It's not expecting those big turbos. They ran into a few hiccups while I was there, so I had to knock out some of the consumables, the coolant, the oil, the Pitocin. They bled some systems. All in all, it was about $1,500. So for all the parts we just listed, and you know what? I think I'll grab my calculator out to make sure I don't make a fool of myself. That ran us $11,650. There are a few more things. One of them is estimated. That's what is it going to cost to fix that air ride setup that's on the car. I think it should cost a couple $100. The other couple things we have to do, charge the AC and get an alignment. They're $100 a pop. That puts the miscellaneous category at $1,940. And with all that information, that brings us to a grand total on this car of $58,590. And holy shit, that's amazing. This entire time I've had a feeling we were gonna do really well in this car. You could kind of tell that things were headed in the right direction. You knew we hadn't spent a ton of money, but to see this number on what should be an $85,000 car, there's quite literally no way this could have turned out better. Now, of course, being that I already have one of these cars, we are gonna have to sell this thing, and that leaves us plenty of room to make some money and put it into another project here at some point. If you follow this market at all, you know it's been quite some time since you've been able to buy a manual 997 turbo for anything close to that. It's happened before and it will definitely happen again. That I'll buy a similar project and instead of going super smooth like this one did, everything will go horribly. We'll have a ton of money wrapped up into it. And when it's all said and done, it probably won't have been worth doing. I'm not sure exactly how long this one's gonna stick around, but at some point here, once we finish up all the little odds and ends, it will be listed for sale. So if you're one of the people that's reached out and said you were interested in buying this after it's done, keep an eye on all our social media pages. I'll let you guys know when it gets posted for sale. And with that said, I suppose it's time to get on the internet and get back to the drawing board. Let's go find ourselves another piece of junk project that will hopefully follow in the footsteps of this one and not give us too much trouble. Who am I kidding? We all know that's not gonna be the case. Thank you guys so much for following along with this project, and we'll see you back here really soon with something.
Adios.
And now we should have everything we need to put this 911 Turbo back together and hear it run. Fuck off! God damn it! Y'all can't see what happened. Oh boy, stalled it over there.
Take it H2O.
Oh, stop.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, hold on.
That's
Don't you
awesome.
have an actual Volkswagen right now?
I do. I mean, I could go with you.
While we hunt around for that activation we're looking for, just one more helpful note. If you want to spray your computer accidentally with water, you just hit that headlight washer pump activation right there. It'll do it for you real fast. Okay. Hey, Porsche gang. Porsche gang. Not turbo, little narrow body came for. Nice work, man. You know, I carefully placed all that stuff on a lift on
Yeah,
where it
right.
wouldn't be damaged,
Carefully.
it wouldn't be lost.
Carefully.
Just throw it all over the
You
floor.
don't believe that.
How weird is it? Like, you actually gonna make the conversion from 85 to 93? That's like.
Why do you keep bringing? I'm not happy about this. Look, we're gonna return this car to stock. 3 videos later, we're gonna be like building the next 1,000 horsepower Porsche. You're about to nail your head on that tire, by the way.
No, you know, it's perfect.
The perks of being 5'3", huh?
5'3"?
Mechanicry? Mechanic. It's a word, right? No, it's definitely not a word. Mechanicry? We're dumb, not stupid.
At least that makes sense.
It makes tons of sense.
Alright.
We're dumb, not stupid.
Okay.
Is stupid worse than dumb?
I don't know.
Why are you not f***ing focused? Oh, you f***. It's an $8,000 Zona Rona. Well, now takes are gonna be fucking good on this one. Now, I actually have used an RPS. Damn it, which one's not out? Ho ho ho! Ho ho! Shit.
Progress in the RX-7? Yeah!
Progress on the FD, baby.
Woo!
What a piece of junk.
Oh, that was close.
This is how $100,000 looks like.
Trash box right there. Calling it.
3, 2, 1.
I build cars, I don't play basketball, leave me alone. The filter housing itself is actually, those of you guys who don't know, E85, extremely corrosive. You definitely don't want it sitting in your tank, your line, your injectors, anything.